For your first question, on top of the treasurer constitutional duties, you have implied responsibilities as a member of top four, which may result in imposter syndrome. How are you going to manage imposter syndrome with both your constitutional and implied responsibilities as a top four officer?
Um, Thank you for the question. Like you said, aside from our constitutional duties, we as officers have other responsibilities, whether that would be during our annual events such as our FACN and high school conferences. As mentioned before, this past year on board has taught me how to be a leader in the roles that you are not responsible for, and what it really means to be a team player and truly caring about everybody that is in your team. To answer the imposter syndrome part, I believe that the only way to go through it is, practicing and executing leadership. One second. Okay, run it back. Me being on board will put me in environments where I have to become a leader, whether I feel confident about it or not, and I just feel like the consistency and the other officers that support me will allow me to overcome any imposter syndromes that I have or anyone else may have. Yeah.
For your second question, at the end of each year, associated students require a detailed explanation and presentation from our treasurer on why AB Samahan should receive funding. In recent years, the treasurer has also been able to advocate for more funding than before. How would you go about this, and what would you explain to AS?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Of course.
Please.
Do you want the full question?
Yes, please.
At the end of each year, associated students requires a detailed explanation and presentation from our treasurer on why AB Samahan should receive funding. In recent years, the treasurer has also been able to advocate for more funding than before. How would you go about this, and what would you explain to AS?
To be quite so honest, to answer this question, I will be utilizing my resources as much as possible, and ask my predecessors and those treasurers that you mentioned that are able to advocate a raise in funds. I would ask them to see what talking points that they presented to AS, and what kind of pattern of events that would pique interest, then it would allow AS to grant us more funding. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. For your last officer question, an additional responsibility of the treasurer is managing attendance and fees, and there may be executive board members who do not communicate or do not pay their attendance charges. How will you ensure that communication and attendance are emphasized amongst the executive board members?
Okay. As part of my role as being treasurer, I will be sure to put a lot of efforts in the beginning of the year, setting the foundation of how you guys can work with me, like how my fellow officers can work with me, since this is not my money, this is our money. I would put in a lot of efforts into, like I said, establish that foundation on what rules we have to abide by in managing our funds. That includes, attendance fees, and I believe that me having personal relationships with my fellow officers can make me be comfortable in reaching out to them to see if there are any miscommunications that happen. Sometimes officers may not know that they even got charged or what they're being charged for. So if I see any problems of my fellow officers kind of staying on track and keeping up with their attendance fees. My first priority was just to communicate that they have these outstanding charges and where it comes from, and hopefully that will resolve the issue and just solve it right there. And if not, I will consult the rest of my board, because it is, a rule that we all, no one's above it, and it wouldn't be fair if I just let you off the hook and I'm on business with everyone else. Yes.
Are you ready for the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. Moving into your audience questions. As the manager of Samahan's budget, you are an integral part of the event planning process. How do you feel about the current systems in place to aid in the budgeting process for events, and what is your vision for improvements?
Can you say the question one more time?
The whole thing, or just
the whole thing?
Okay. As the manager of Samahan's budget, you are an integral part of the event planning process. How do you feel about the current systems? How do you feel about the current systems in place to aid in the budgeting process for events, and what is your vision for improvements?
My visions, okay. To answer the last part of the question, my visions of improvement, to clarify, is the question about improving our budget?
About the budgeting process for events.
Oh, okay. I don't want to say there's no room for improvement, but I really look up to how Jay handles, my predecessor Jay, the current treasurer, handles her responsibilities as treasurer, and how she communicates that information towards the rest of the board. Can you say the question one more time?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. As the manager of Samahan's budget, you are an integral part of the event planning process. How do you feel about the current systems in place to aid in the budgeting process for events, and what is your vision for improvements?
I believe my vision in improvement would just be, just everyone that are involved in the decision-making part or the event planning process are aware of what we're spending our money on and what other options that we could use our money on. I feel like that would be my vision of improvement, would just be increasing efficiency and how I communicate things, and how much everyone understands like their options and their stuff.
For our last question, managing the funds of this organization goes beyond the term you are elected. If elected, and in consideration for your terms, events, and costs, as well as the future, how do you plan to manage the Samahan budget for your term and the next?
Can you say the question one more time?
Managing the funds of this organization goes beyond the term that you are elected. If elected, and in consideration for your terms, events, and costs, as well as the future, how do you plan to manage the Samahan budget for your term and the next?
Okay. One of the things that I brought up on my speech was that I want to create living documents for all of our annual events and any financial activities around it. That will allow us to identify patterns that we have in what events are doing good and what events don't do as well. And I feel like having one living document of each event will help us see kind of the pattern, and we can make assumptions from that, and pass that knowledge down to our future treasurers, and to see if they can use that decision in their term and how it can benefit their board.